All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So when we first started talking about cellular respiration, one of the things I mentioned to you was that you were going to need to be able to identify and memorize the chemical reaction, the overall chemical reaction for cellular respiration. And you should also be able to identify where the reactants or products are either produced or created throughout the process and where those processes take place. So today we're going to take some time to really sort of boil down all of these major components to doing just that. So first off, let's just remember the chemical reaction for cellular respiration. So when we look at this, right, I'm going to take in a single molecule of glucose, right, which is C6H12O6. All right. In addition to that, I'm also going to require 6 molecules of oxygen. Okay. When we go through those processes of glycolysis, of the grooming, of the Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation, I then ultimately create 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water plus a bunch of that ATP. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these reactants and these products and I'm going to list them down here in this first column. So here's my glucose. My oxygen, my carbon dioxide, my water, and my ATP. Okay. Then the question becomes, where do I use them or create them? So both that glucose and that oxygen are both reactants. So where am I using them in this overall process of cellular respiration? So that glucose initially is going to go into that process of glycolysis. Okay. And that oxygen ultimately is really going to be used in that oxidative phosphorylation. Okay. And then these last three are the major products. So where do they ultimately come out of? Where do I create them? And in the process, I create that carbon dioxide both in that grooming step as well as in my Krebs cycle. The water comes out as part of that oxidative phosphorylation. And then that ATP actually comes out a little bit in each step. So I make a little in glycolysis. I make some in that Krebs cycle. And then I make the bulk of it in that oxidative phosphorylation. All right. The final component to this then is where do these processes actually take place in your cells? So when I look at glycolysis, right, where does that take place? That takes place in my cytoplasm. I get to that oxidative phosphorylation and where am I actually using that oxygen? That oxidative phosphorylation takes place really in that mitochondrial inner membrane. Right? It's going to serve as that final electron acceptor at the end of that electron transport chain. Now, carbon dioxide gets produced both in grooming as well as in your Krebs cycle. So that grooming is taking place in my cytoplasm, and that Krebs cycle takes place in my mitochondrial matrix. Oxidative phosphorylation, same idea. So this is going to take place in that mitochondrial inner membrane. And then when I come down here, right, glycolysis we said takes place in my cytoplasm. Krebs cycle in the mitochondrial matrix. And then that oxidative phosphorylation across that inner membrane.